She was in her home. The limousines were lined outside of her house ready to take her to church. She was in the home taking pictures. And all of a sudden knocked on the door. This man, Austin Garcia, the one whom she used to love. He told her family members, I just wanted to come to congratulate her, to wish her well. And then when he came inside of the house, he had a little suitcase. He opened the suitcase, pulled out a gun, and shot her, murdered her right there on her living room floor. While her fiancé, the man that she was about to marry, was already at the church waiting for her at the altar. Can you imagine? Here's a man waiting for the woman to marry. Next thing he knows that the woman is dead. Who killed her? It was a man that used to be madly in love with her. Sometimes, brothers and sisters, this emotion called love is a very thin line. A thin line between love and hatred. And I discovered something. That one moment you may have before you a person that you love more than anything, and then all of a sudden the same one who loved you to that degree can be transformed and hate you to the same degree that they used to love you. Be careful. Those of you who are married, I pray Allah that you stay married, that your relationship will grow, and that you'll become closer to your wife and closer to your husband. I hope that your relationship will grow. History has recorded, I have witnessed it. I have married hundreds and hundreds of Muslim couples. And I remember the nikah, the wedding. Everyone is happy and smiling and people full of joy. But then the same people that had tears of joy come to my office. Imam Siraj, we want to get a divorce. So many marriages begin in bliss and end in a nightmare. Be careful. Because one moment that person can be your friend, and then in the next moment can be your worst enemy. But not only sometimes good relationships sour, on the other hand, sometimes bad relationships can become beautiful ones. Beware of the enemies within. I would like to call your attention to a woman. Her name is Hind bint Utbah. You may have heard about this woman. There's a very famous hadith that Hind bint Utbah came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And before I say what she said, I want to caution you about something. Brothers, treat your wives well. You never know, 100 years from now, 500 years from now, maybe your wife wrote a book or write a book. I mean, she don't write a book 500 years from now. She write it now, read 500 years from now. And she may mention you in her book. This woman Hind said, Ya Rasulullah, Inna Aba Sufyan, Innahu rajulun misikun. Innahu rajulun misikun. He is a miser. Now let's stop for a moment. I bet you Abu Sufyan never dreamed that 1400 years later, Muslims are going to be reading the hadith called Bukhari, and his wife would have said that my husband, Abu Sufyan, is a miser. Right? And she asked the Prophet a question. She said, Ya Rasulullah, Hal alayya harjan. Is there any sin on me if I take from his wealth to feed me and my family? And the Prophet said, no, la haraja. There's no harm. Sisters, I got good news for you. If your husband is a miser and he don't give you any money, just go right in his wallet. Yeah, it's in the hadith. It's there. So we learn a very important point of Islamic law from this woman, Hind. But that's not the real story about this woman. Let me tell you the real story. This woman was a companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but you have to go to the history and study this woman. This woman said to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, this is the beginning of this hadith, by the way. Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was no family on this earth more hated by me than your family. But now you are more loved, and I would want more honor for this family than any other family on the earth. You know this woman Hind was? This is the same Hind on the death of Hamza at the Battle of Uhud. She ate his liver. That's how much she hated the Prophet and hated his family. But then Hind becomes a friend of the Prophet and loves the Prophet. And that brings me now to my talk to you tonight. And alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters, not going to be long. Most of you know that I'm from the United States, right? From a city called New York City. New York is a tough place. How many of you been to New York? Raise your hand. Okay. Hardeth went last year, boy. He's still shaking. It's a tough place. How tough is it? You ever remember reading a hadith where a person murdered 100 people? They didn't say what city he was from. I suspect it was New York. Yeah, it's really rough. I remember, you may not believe this, I was 5 years old. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, in what's called the Fort Greene Projects downtown. And we used to have gang fights at that age. Wallahi. Wallahi. Gang fights. Can you imagine Siraj, 5 years old? So we used to fight with the people around the corner. And I remember one day they caught me. They're the same age as me. And they held me and they were, beating me up. And I remember the guy who hit me the hardest, a guy named Chris. But something strange happened. Well, at that time, I wasn't Siraj, I was Jeffrey. Now everybody knows. I try to keep it a secret, I'll tell what I... But something strange happened. Some 20-something years later, Jeffrey, that 5-year-old boy in the gang fight, becomes Siraj Wahaj, the Imam of Masjid al-Taqwa. And Chris becomes Abdul Rauf, the Naib, assistant Imam to Imam Siraj at Masjid al-Taqwa. Wallahi. Unbelievable. What is it? يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتون إلا وأنتم مسلمون واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا. O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and do not die except as a Muslim, and remember Allah's favor on you, and you were enemies, and Allah tied your hearts together, and then you became brothers. Abdul Rauf is such a friend of mine that when one of my babies were born, I allowed him to do what's called tahniq. You know the Prophet, when he took honey at the birth of a new baby and put the honey in the baby's mouth, I allowed Abdul Rauf, as a sign of my love for him, to allow him to do that to one of the births of one of my